So we've really been the only one. That's not the case anymore. And we need to wake up and recognize steps to help create a better future and make sure that we're the first superpower to stand the test of time.
My money.
I get money from you.
Money in the bank.
Young money.
It's a rich man's world.
And I've got over 40 years of executive level experience in the public sector, private sector, not-for-profit sector. I'm a certified public accountant by training. I work at PricewaterhouseCoopers and Arthur Andersen. Over the years, I was a global partner with Arthur Andersen and ran their human capital strategy practice. I have been head of 3 federal agencies. One was the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. The other one was the Employee Benefit Security Administration and the Labor Department. The third was the Government Accountability Office, which is in the legislative branch. In that capacity, I served as Comptroller General of the United States, which in English is Auditor General and Chief Performance and Accountability Officer of the United States. I've also been a trustee of Social Security and Medicare. I've been chairman of the Audit Committee of the United Nations. I've been on a number of not-for-profit boards, and I'm currently a distinguished visiting professor and the Admiral Crowe Chair at the U.S. Naval Academy, where I teach the economics of national security.
Hence the Navy's fortune. I love it. And happy Veterans Day and all. It's just that's great. Very good. So, and the funny thing is that I told you about one of the guys I'm mentoring here. He went. A bunch of guys, pilots who are clients, they went to the Naval Academy, so they think the world of you. But the first off, Dave, I just have one question because you've been a pretty tenacious guy and very resilient one, and and like me, you're a physical conservative, and you have a lot of tenacity. And you ran for something like the governor of Connecticut, and I said, where did you get your tenacity? Where did that come from? From your family or your dad? Where did that come from?
My father probably was influenced that, but I've always believed that when there's something that's important and you think you have an ability to make a difference in that particular area, that you ought to do what you can to make that difference. In the case of Connecticut, in a moment of temporary insanity, I decided. The reason I did it is because the state was in terrible condition. I mean, just absolutely terrible condition, and it's in worse condition now.
Is it worse now?
Yeah, and I knew that I had the kind of background, and I also had the willingness and the ability to do what needed to be done because, to me, I wanted to go in there and make the changes and get the heck out. Politics is not a merit or integrity-based endeavor, and I like to think that I'm a merit and integrity-based person. So. That didn't work out. I have been fortunate to have a number of presidential appointments by both Republicans and Democrats for very high-level positions in the federal government, and that's something that I find to be more in line with what I'm all about. Because at least there's some merit involved with that. You don't have to run for office and spend half your time.
I admire you for that. I said, Dave, you're such a good guy. Why are you doing this to yourself? But in any event.
Well, my dad told me, literally, he said, Dave, you have too much integrity to be in elective office. And you know what? God rest his soul, he was right.
Yeah, he was right. So he was right. But anyhow, so and by the way, full disclosure, folks, Dave was kind enough to do the forward to my last book, and thank you so much, and Dave, and because one of the big concerns about everyone's retirement security today, and it's gotten worse since the last time we talked, but we're going to talk about your new book. But I would be honest with you, I think everyone should get this book, and there's a lot of meat in it. We're kind of going to go through an executive summary, but America in 2040 Still a Superpower. It's a riveting book, and it's kind of like throwing a cold bucket of water on the nation, and sometimes I say, is this country really is screwed up? And one of the things which is on everyone's mind today is the COVID-19, and which I thought the research you have in the book is very up to date on this. And one of the things which really brought to mind was we talk about deaths from COVID, but you know, we have what 30 to 35 to 60,000 deaths a year from the flu. Anyhow, we have 600,000 deaths from cancer, and we have over 600,000 abortions a year. I mean, to me, but no, nothing's taken in context in the media anymore. Is it really that rigged in the Emerald City? I mean, is it really this bad, David?
Well, if we talk about COVID-19,
Yeah.
the media has done a terrible job of providing contextual sophistication with regard to COVID-19. And I'll give you a few numbers. First, if you look at the last coronavirus that we had, which is the 1918, so-called Spanish flu, the modern day equivalent of the 1918 Spanish flu for the United States would be losing over 2 million lives.
Yeah.
And we've lost tragically about 240,000, which is tragic. But even that number is a bogus number. And the reason that number is a bogus number is because, believe it or not, hospitals paid $18,000 to $35,000 more for any patient that they put down as having died from COVID-19, even though they may have never been tested for COVID-19. And so the only thing that you can really do is to really look at the death rate, okay? And the death rate is very, very low. It significantly by different portions of the population. And one of the things that has not been done is we have not balanced economic, public health, individual liberty considerations. All too frequently, they try to take a one-size-fits-all to deal with this problem, and so therefore the public health impact of COVID-19 has been much, much, much less than the last coronavirus. But the economic impact has been much worse.
Yes.
And so we've got to do a better job of taking a risk-based approach and achieving a better balance between economic, public health, and individual liberty considerations. Hopefully that will happen going forward. It looks like we have at least one vaccine that's likely to be approved, which has a very high preliminary effectiveness rate, much higher than the flu vaccine. And we've learned a lot from it. We've got other treatments now that can be used. So we cannot live in fear. We need to take it seriously with regard to masks, with regard to social distancing, with regard to hygiene, but we must not live in fear. And I will not allow myself to live in fear.
Hey, hallelujah, man! Because all the peddling is fear. Luckily, I have some pretty high profile clients in medicine, things like that, surgeons and so forth, and they think a lot of it's a lot of BS. And I was just talking to another medical professional who actually worked in a hospital rehab facility, and they're just saying it's Massachusetts, which is kind of a hot area, and so much of the stuff is so manipulated. So and this woman had to actually wear all the guns and stuff like that. So it's tragic in the whole thing. But my feeling, David, is the COVID thing has made all our economic problems blossom. Would you agree? It's just kind of like
one of the things I talk about in the book is that what does it take to be a superpower? And it really takes several things. You need to be a respected country with global economic, diplomatic, military, and cultural influence. And let's take COVID-19. COVID-19 has had an adverse impact on all. It's had a serious adverse economic impact. It's also harmed us, with regard to international relations in many regards. It also has compromised our readiness with regard to the military. I mean, remember the CVN 71, which is the Teddy Roosevelt, the so-called big stick aircraft carrier, had to be taken out of action for several weeks in Guam because a number of members of the crew had COVID-19, and that was forward deployed to protect our interest in the South China Sea. So the bottom line is that I think COVID-19 is quite frankly a case study in the lack of effective planning, risk management, and execution by government. And it's just the latest one. And one of the reasons that we have that is because we've been a republic since 1789. Still don't have a comprehensive, future-focused, outcome-based, resource-constrained plan. We have no plan. China's got a plan. They're executing on their plan. They've already passed us on GDP based on purchasing power parity. They've already passed us on number of diplomatic missions. They are determined to pass us militarily, okay, and they're probably number 2 right now for military capabilities, okay. And what are we doing? And to the extent that we don't end up putting our finances in order, it's going to have an adverse adverse impact on economic growth, an adverse impact on individual opportunity, an adverse impact on security, and it's going to have an adverse impact on domestic tranquility over time. So this is a really big issue that we need to recognize reality. We've got to do what it takes to beat COVID-19. But once we beat COVID-19, we've got to execute on a plan that will restore fiscal sustainability for this country and for its citizens and future generations.
Amen. Because you have children, you have grandchildren as well, and it's not just about us. And we got to be good stewards.
Let me kind of give your viewers a call. Very quick. The book is in 3 sections. The first section is a wake-up call. The first chapter talks about what things can look like internationally and domestically if we don't change course. It's not a pretty scenario.
No, it's pretty ugly.
No, it's plausible, and I've had it checked by a number of people.
Oh, I agree.
It's not predictive, and it's clearly not preferable. The second chapter is about COVID-19, which we've just talked about. And then the next section talks about learning lessons from history, past superpowers, how we strayed from the founding principles of the country great. And then we talk about a way forward. And a way forward is what are the kinds of things that we need to do to create a better future, much of which is based upon the results of a 27-state, 10,000-mile national fiscal responsibility bus tour that I did in 2012, where we achieved 77 to 97% agreement on a range of budget, tax, Social Security, healthcare, Medicare, defense, government organization operations, and political reforms. 77 to 97% agreement, okay? So the public's ahead of the politicians. We need to recognize that. We need to create a mechanism that will set the table for the politicians to be able to make the tough choice before we have a crisis economy that would cause an economic disaster worse than anything we've seen. And we can avoid it. We can. And I show how.
Yeah. So, but one of the things, Dave, we talked about the Roman Empire, and did we talk about the various empires which have fallen? Okay, and it's generally been one of the things that has been all the spending trillions and trillions upon debt, and isn't it kind of irresponsible, unethical, and immoral, if you will, the way we're spending money? I mean, how much have we spent on COVID right now? 3 trillion, or I don't know.
Not trillion, and we're probably spend another 2. Look, let's talk about the Roman Empire for a second, okay? Rome fell for a number of reasons: responsibility, political instability, moral decay, overextended military, and inability to control its borders. Does that sound familiar?
I think we've seen this movie before, huh?
Yeah, and look. The point is, look, I am not a deficit hawk, and not all. Sometimes you have to run deficits. If you've got a national emergency like now, if you're at war, there are sometimes you got to run deficits. Not all debt is bad. Debt that benefits multiple generations is not bad. Okay, debt that is designed to, in the form of investments such as research and development, such as infrastructure, and certain things that actually can help increase economic growth, increase opportunity. I mean, those things aren't bad. Okay, the problem is when you have too much debt as a percentage of the economy, it will end up resulting in a drag on economic growth, which has an adverse impact on all the things that we've talked about, and has an adverse impact on all 4 components that it takes to remain a superpower: economic, diplomatic, military, and cultural. We've been the only superpower since World War II until recently, because the Soviet Union was not a global economic and cultural. It didn't have global economic power or cultural influence. So we've really been the only one. That's not the case anymore. And we need to wake up and recognize steps to help create a better future and make sure that we're the first superpower to stand the test of time.
And a lot of this stuff kind of goes back when the Federal Reserve was created in 2013, and that's when they introduced the income tax. If you, yeah,
19,
1913, right?
right.
And then we've had an income tax, and then and the Fed is it's really kind of been. Just most people don't understand how the banking system really works, and if you understand what the Fed did, they bailed out the banks in 2007, 2008, and it started with the repo market last year, and now it's going again. Then we had the multiplier effect. How do you feel about having a sound money for the economy going forward? Because a lot of it's now, David, there used to be 9-to-1, 10-to-1 reserve ratio. Now it's technically they can lend out whatever they want. There is no reserve requirements. Are you a sound money guy on this stuff, or?
Here's the bottom line. We've talked about the fact how fiscal policy, which is tax and spending, is irresponsible and unsustainable. But I also believe that monetary policy is unsustainable as well. I mean, the fact is if you go back to 2008, 2009, the Fed intervened in extraordinary ways to try to be with that banking crisis. But it's intervened in even bigger and broader ways now because of COVID-19. It was trying to draw down its balance sheet, all the debt that it bought, all the U.S. government debt that it bought, and then COVID-19 hit, and now it has expanded its balance sheet dramatically. They're in a tough spot because what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to help promote economic growth, promote full employment, and maintain stable prices. And when Congress doesn't do its job, it puts more pressure on the Fed. The problem is right now is, the Fed is buying all this new debt. We do not have market rates of interest right now.
Oh, it's horrible.
They are artificially low. They are not going to stay low. Inflation is low right now, which allows the Federal Reserve to focus on the other two missions that it has, which is economic growth and full employment. Okay. But, the fact is that what they're doing is not sustainable over time. So we have to end up changing course, not just on fiscal policy, but monetary policy after we get COVID-19. I believe that we are abusing our status as the world's largest reserve currency. And you know as well as I do that once you lose confidence, things can get out of control.
Yeah.
And so we have to demonstrate that we understand that we're doing what we need to do under the circumstances, but that we are committed to be able to change course and to move to more sustainable policies over time after we defeat COVID-19.
Yeah, because see the monetary policy now, Dave, what I see is going on today, I don't know what the market's doing, it goes up. I mean, I had a friend of mine, Stan, the annuity man, we're seeing swings in the market, Dave, where when I first started my career in finance, we'd see, which happened in a year, we'll see within a day or two, we'll see 1,000-point swings in a day. I mean, I think what's today, Wednesday, I think we had, 1,000, would it go up 1,300 points on Monday? And now this is 20, 30 years ago, we'd see this over a month or months or over a year, and now we're seeing it in a day. And the thing is what we have is massive disintermediation, and people's money are being forced into the market. And to me, it's very, very unsafe. Furthermore, it makes the what's the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the state and public pension plans, which are a mess. As you're in Connecticut, you know better than anyone.
The number one financial challenge at every level of government is underfunded pension and retiree healthcare plans. The fact is that there are several states in the union right now that if they declare bankruptcy, they should declare bankruptcy, but they can't under current law. And unfortunately, some of those states, one of which I just exited, some of those states already have very high tax, already have very high cost of living, already have very tough regulatory policies, okay? And yet they have these huge unfunded obligations that absent a restructuring or absent a renaissance, which they're not going to get, okay, for competitive reasons, means just higher taxes and more of a problem over time. And that's why states are actually losing population. Which is going to compound and make the problem even worse. Probably the three worst states in the union from a financial standpoint are New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut. If you look at the federal level, our biggest challenge at the federal level is unfunded retirement obligations. But it's not just civilian and military pensions and retiree health care. It's the tens of trillions in unfunded promises associated with Social Security and Medicare, of which Medicare is a much bigger issue than Social Security is.
Yeah, an actuary friend of mine said, you could fix the pension problem. He said the big one is the healthcare crisis, and but it gets worse too because with the manipulation of low interest rates, it makes the pension problem worse. Because there's no safe yield out there anymore, and I never thought in all my days when I would see the Federal Reserve buying junk bonds. So there'd be a lot more bankruptcies if the Fed wasn't buying.
The Fed in 2008, 2009 helped a number of foreign banks, but and now the Fed's helping out state and local government and corporations. I mean, where's that in the mandate? I mean, it's just incredible what's going on now.
Now, but you mentioned part of the book. And I think it was one of the tours recently, whatever. 80% of the public, I think, from your like town meetings or whatever you call them, 80% of the people agree with you. But
here's the issue. In 2012, I, along with others, engaged in a 27-state, 10,000-mile national fiscal responsibility bus tour. And we were able to get a lot of coverage on that. We were able to raise the visibility of this issue. All right. Unfortunately, the visibility is not as high now. We've got to work at it again. We had two special events in swing districts in swing states in the North and South. One was in Ohio, one was in Virginia. Virginia was a swing state back then. It's really not now, but Ohio still is. Okay. And what we did is that we took extraordinary efforts in combination with a group called America Speaks to recruit a demographically representative group of voters, age, race, income, political affiliation, etc. And we had these persons come on a Saturday, and we paid them something to be there, but we had a demographically representative group, all right, there. We empowered them with electronic confidential balloting so that they could end up giving immediate feedback confidentially. We gave them the facts, told them the truth about where we are, where we've been, where we're headed, and what the potential adverse consequences are if we don't change. And then we exposed them to a goal, a ratio of spending reductions to revenue increases. The goal was debt to GDP goal, principles and values that would bring people together rather than divide them apart. And then after that, specific reforms dealing with budget and taxes and spending, et cetera. We got over 90% agreement that this should be top priority. We got over 90% agreement that it's primarily a spending problem, but we're going to need more revenues. I mean, my hypothesis going into this was that the people were smarter than the politicians. They could handle the facts. They were willing to accept the truth. They accept tough choices if they're part of a comprehensive goal-based plan that's consistent with principles and values bringing together. And so we're going to need a new statutory fiscal sustainability commission to set the table for politicians to be able to make tough choices for an up or down vote. But the fact is that commission is going to have to engage the public in unprecedented ways in order to till the ground, in order to get the input be feasible and equitable that Congress is willing to act on. And so, look, I mean, we need to do it again, but we need to do it again based upon an official imprimatur, a statutory fiscal sustainability commission that the Congress buys in, the president buys in, and that will enable us to achieve success. I'll mention one last thing on this. In the late 1990s, I participated in a similar endeavor just on Social Security that was sponsored by AARP and the Concord Coalition with the support of the White House. And I participated in that as the truth teller because I had been a trustee of Social Security and Medicare. I was a CPA partner with Arthur Anderson. So both the AARP and the Concord Coalition thought that I was somebody they could trust. And the Clinton administration felt comfortable with it too. And we did a similar thing just on Social Security. And I'm absolutely confident that we would achieve Social Security reform before the year 2000, but for President Clinton's personal indiscretions. When he had his personal indiscretions, he wanted Social Security reform to be one of his political legacies. We would have achieved it because we were going about it the right way. All right. And unfortunately, we didn't do anything. And the shocking thing is the changes that we're going to have to make are basically going to be about the same as what we would have made back then, but they're just going to have to be bigger, and we're going to have less transition time. I mean, this is not rocket science.
Yeah, because my concern, because what we've seen, I just over my career, is that all these fiscal policies, these tax policies, have just increased economic inequalities greater and greater. And I think it's really it's tinder and for a greater problem. Yeah, and thank you, by the way. I saw something. What about tax reform? And I mean, as you know, I've been working on a book about private equity for a number of years, but I saw the number 2 preferential item, Dave, and I want to get your opinion on this. Was first, the biggest exemption, if you will, is offsets for health insurance for employers. That's the biggest. What do they call it? Tax exception?
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. Tax exclusion. All right, it's not for the employers; it's for the individuals. Okay, the large tax preference is the fact that individuals do not pay income taxes or payroll taxes on employer-provided and paid health care. Now, the last time I checked, that was called compensation. Okay, that was called compensation. It is a large and the fastest growing component of compensation. It is hundreds of billions a year. All right. Normally you provide an incentive when it's something that you're trying to encourage people to do that otherwise they wouldn't do. That's not the case here. The number 1 benefit of choice by employees is healthcare. The number 2 is healthcare. The number 3 is healthcare. Why are we throwing hundreds of billions of dollars to encourage people to do something that employers have to do and employees want? So, that's an example of something that we've got that has to be restructured.
This is the whole thing, which the exclusion of long-term capital gains and dividend income. That's it. Because who had it's really for the very, very wealthy. I'm not, and I'm not against wealth. I'm a capitalist, and I'll tell anyone that. But it's just like I said, holy moly! So most of the maximum for these billionaires, most of this is being very lightly taxed the carried interest. How do you feel about carried interest? I was curious about that. That's number 2.
I don't think it should achieve the tax preference that it has now. Okay. The other thing you have to deal is it's not just a matter of what I think. It matters what does the public think. Both of these things we just talked about, super majority said we need to change it. All right. Another thing they said is that we needed to have a more competitive corporate tax system because we're in a global economic Olympics. All right. And we have had corporate tax reform. So that's one of the things that they have moved on. I would argue they've taken the rate lower than it needs to go. Okay. And that's something you can see revisited potentially. It's now going to go down to 21%. At the time that we did this, tour, we were talking 25%. The other thing we talked about was we need to dramatically streamline and simplify the individual tax code. And we need to end up seeing if we can reduce the number of brackets, if we can get the top capital gain, if we can get the top rate down to about 28%, like Reagan did, then how do we have a tax preference for dividends and capital? All right. The other thing a lot of politicians don't understand is wealthy people don't make their money on wages.
No,
that's not how they make their money on investments. Okay. Let me come back to this. And this is all addressed in the book. You touched on something I got to come back to. And that is we have 3 growing gaps in our society. And they represent significant domestic tranquility problems over time if we don't do something about it. We have an income gap, we have a wealth gap, and we have an education gap. And the most important is the education gap because the education gap drives the other 2. So we need to take that seriously. And in order to be able to do some of these things, we're going to need the kind of comprehensive reform package that I'm talking about.
I couldn't agree with you more, Dave, because I'm up here in New Hampshire, beautiful area in New Hampshire. You're down in the district. But how can a young family, and I was just talking to a young man today down in D.C. and the whole thing, he's like, we can't afford a home around here. Well, I'm in New Hampshire, okay, we live here.
I live in Virginia, not the People's Republic of D.C. Not the People's Republic of D.C. Although Virginia has been heading in the left direction lately, which concerns me.
How can people, the real estate it's gone crazy. So it's just I just see a problem if we don't address these things, where it's going to get worse. Because
Well, and real estate, normally goes up, but not always. I lost hundreds of thousands of dollars on my home.
I know it's a beautiful place too.
And by the way, you don't get a deduction on loss of a personal residence.
You're exactly so the and also too, can you explain the fallacy of, and this is MMT,
Modern
monetary theory, like we can print our way out of this?
Well, here's the theory. The theory basically is that deficits and debt don't matter as long as you can issue debt in your own reserve currency, unless and until you have an excess inflation problem. Now, let me tell you my view of that. Number one, it's a theory. All right, it's a theory. Okay, no, unproved theory. Okay. Number two, Number three, it's contrary to long-established economic principles. All right. Number four, it's based upon comparing us to Japan on apples and apples numbers that don't hold. And quite frankly, we don't want to be Japan. Okay. See what's happened to Japan since the 1980s. Okay. Number five, it's likely to cause the excess inflation that would theoretically enable it to be implemented on a short-term basis. So a short-term gain, much greater increased risk of great long. Last thing, which may be the most important, look, Congress is already irresponsible on fiscal policy. You give them some kind of theory like this, it basically will, give them cover to be even more irresponsible. So I think it's just downright dangerous.
Yeah.
By the way, it was advocated by Bernie Sanders' chief economic advisor. So now you know why Bernie never wanted to or had to answer the question, because he believed in the modern monetary theory. It doesn't matter.
You can't get something. I don't know. I keep it simple. You can't get something for nothing, Dave, can you? I don't know.
I call it fluid logic. And you can fill in the blank on what fluid logic is, but.
During this Veterans Day, so going forward, this is a great book, folks. It's got a lot. I told you before, prior to getting on, that there's so much content in this. What do you think of the major things which has to be done?
I was asked within the last few days of what are the top three things that Biden needs to focus on if he prevails to become president. Okay, and I gave him three. I said, number one, COVID-19. It's here and now. You need to take it seriously. We need to be able to push these treatments. We need to be able to push vaccines. You need to be able to take it yourself, but we need to achieve a better balance between economic, public health, and individual liberty considerations. A one-size-fits-all doesn't work. By the way, constitutionally, you can't mandate mask wearing, and the president can't do that. Okay, but my point is, we need to. That's number one. All right. Number two, we need a plan. We need a plan of dealing with all the dimensions that we've talked about. All right, so that we can have a roadmap for where do we want to go, and we can start implementing. China's got one. We don't have one. That's a tremendous competitive disadvantage for us, especially given all the challenges that we face that we've talked about. Okay, and then thirdly, we need a statutory fiscal sustainability commission that will set the table for tough choices on spending, social insurance programs, and revenues after we defeat COVID-19, that engages the public in a meaningful way, and that is guaranteed to vote in Congress when it comes up with the recommendations. That's what we need. Those are the three things we need. Now, there's a lot of other things, okay? There's a lot of other things. My personal view is that obviously if somehow President Trump prevailed, which I think is highly unlikely, but if somehow he did, through the intervention by the courts, he can't run again. That's it. All right. And I personally think that, President, if Joe Biden prevails, Vice President Biden prevails, he's going to be a one-term president because of his age. All right. So that means you got an opportunity. You don't have to worry about re-election. And you can actually do something that's not only good for today, but helps create a much better tomorrow. And that would be a great presidential legacy. So I'm hoping that we can get some action in some of these areas, large, known, growing problems that we just haven't addressed for a number of years. And it's getting late in the ball game.
We got to get some of this money out of politics, Dave. You know, someone told me we have the best democracy money can buy. And,
Well, yeah. One of the chapters in the book, as you know, is about political reforms. Okay, and it's about redistricting reform. It's about integrated open primaries. It's about campaign finance reform. It's about term limits. It's about ranked choice voting. There's just a number of things in there. We now, in my view, Barry, have a republic, which, as you know, is a representative democracy that is not representative of nor responsive to the general public. I myself am a political independent. 42% of registered voters are political independent.
22% are independent, yeah.
But we have no seat at the table. You know, they talk about a bipartisan approach. We need a transpartisan approach. We need an approach that ends up involving all of our segments of society, okay, including the 42% of voters who are unaffiliated for good reason. That's the only segment of the population that's growing, I mean, if you will. And so, look, you know, we're a great nation, and we can solve this problem, but we can't solve it until we wake up, until we, you know, recognize that it's better to do it sooner rather than later, and until we end up having mechanisms to be able to achieve these tough choices.
That sounds great. So how do you like teaching at the Naval Academy?
Oh, it's great. I actually was supposed to go there as a plebe 50 years ago. I couldn't go because I have a bad left ear.
Okay.
So it was, you know, really something to be recruited by the Naval Academy to be a professor there. And so far, there's been 100% agreement that it's better to be a professor than a plebe. But the other issue is that, you know, we are teaching in person. You know, we are wearing masks, maintaining social distancing, doing personal, you know, looking out for personal hygiene, but we are teaching in person. You know, I feel badly for people who aren't teaching in person. I mean, it's just not nearly as effective, especially for younger people. It's just not nearly as effective. And I think that's something that we haven't gotten right. I mean, by the way, in 1918, we didn't close down the schools.
Yeah.
We didn't close down the schools. Okay. And by the way, most European countries didn't close down the schools either. All right. And what does that do to the education gap? Sure doesn't help it. Okay. And so I think it's great. You know, we have men and women from all over the country. We teach them morally, mentally, and physically. We're basically a STEM plus leadership university. And I'm pleased to say that last year we ranked #1 for undergraduate programs in the United States. So that's good, you know, for a university.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, David, look, we'll have to do it again. And thank you so much.
We counted on America to be passive.